name intaglios, engravings.
I'm hoping that the geoglyphs here in the lower Mojave Desert can give me some insights into the meaning of the Nazca Lines. And once again, the best way to see these things is from the air. Joe?
Yeah, Joe Shebley.
Hey, Josh.
Josh, nice to meet you.
Great to meet you.
Understand you want to go see the intaglio.
I do.
Well, I know where they're at.
The flight takes us from the irrigated flatlands around the small town of Blythe towards a low range of mountains in the distance. The intaglios are in the foothills on the far side. As we fly over the mountains, I'm struck by how similar the parched, barren landscape of the Mojave is to the Nazca Plains. Finally, I see the intaglios beneath us. They're much smaller than the Nazca Lines, and sometimes hard to make out. The first one I see seems to be a human figure, gesturing. Others are not far away. There's another human figure. Close to it is an animal, though which one it's hard to say. They're really intriguing.
I knew about the Nazca Lines. I had no idea that we had geoglyphs here in North America. But again, why? Why did people go to such lengths to put these forms in the middle of a very dry, hostile environment? What do they mean?
I can't wait to get down on the ground and investigate them further. What really distinguishes the intaglios from the Nazca Lines is that the direct descendants of the people who made them still live in these lands.
How do you do?
So the first person I want to talk to is Lori Kachora, an archaeologist and an elder of the Quechan people.
Lori, as a member of the Quechan Nation, what can you and your people tell me about the intaglios?
They use them for religious practice. There are two different types. There is one that's the good being, and then there's one that's the bad. So when you look at it, we're talking about the negative and positive world, negative and positive way of our life.
So cosmic forces are being dealt with around these geoglyphs?
Yes.
But practically speaking, then, how would people actually use these as part of their ceremonies?
Oh yes, people use them in many different ways, just seeking for knowledge, wisdom, whatever one is searching for.
What Lori tells me about the intaglios is a real revelation. Their meaning has nothing to do with astronomy or water, and everything to do with religion. They are figures from the great creation myths of his people. He says that they were also the sites for vision quests and important ceremonies. Could this have been the purpose behind the Nazca Lines too? It might explain why the people of Nazca spent so much time and energy creating them. Perhaps, like the intaglios, the figures were the gods of Nazca creation. Could it be the Nazca were turning the desert into a sacred landscape, a great ritual arena where they could perform their ceremonies? The person who might be able to tell me more is one of the world's leading authorities on geoglyphs, David Whitley.
David, what can the geoglyphs here at Blythe tell me about the geoglyphs at Nazca?
Well, what's important about these is that we have historical and contemporary Native American accounts for why these were made and how they were used ceremonially. That may not be exactly the same as the reasons why the Nazca Lines were created and how they were used, but it begins to give us an idea of how traditional people why they made and how they used these sorts of features, and that's a good place to start an archaeological investigation.
The intaglios are fragile. Like the Nazca Lines, they're as easy to erase as they were to make. Fencing them in may not be beautiful, but it makes very good sense.
It looks like they make these the same way. They push away the volcanic crust to reveal the lighter sand below.
This desert pavement, yes, just scraped away.
So what does this mean?
Well, this happens to be Mastamho, the creator deity. And this is the location of a mythic event, a place where he did something important in the creation story. Here, the rivers of the Colorado River waters were rising, and he stopped the area from flooding by raising and lowering his arms 4 times. That caused the water to recede, and it saved the people.
And they've captured that story here on the ground.
Correct.
And there are others? I think there's one more down there.
Yes, there are others that are related to this particular mythic event.
How is it then that they would use a glyph like this for a ceremony?
What they would do on a ritual pilgrimage would be to come to this location and, for example, use a spot like that and have a ritual dance, a ceremony at a location here where an important event occurred.
So this little patch of sand here was
Cleared area.
cleared away. And then they would perform a ritual here.
A dance, potentially,
That
here.
relates to the geoglyph there.
It would commemorate this particular mythic event.
Lori and David have opened up a whole new dimension to my understanding of these great desert geoglyphs. Here on the Mojave, they were clearly ceremonial sites. Now I need to find out if the Nazca Lines were too. My search for the meaning of the Nazca Lines has taken me from Peru to Southern California. Why did ancient Americans draw giant lines and figures in the desert? Theories that they were astronomical charts or maps of underground water have turned out to be pure conjecture. But in California, I discovered a very different theory about America's mysterious geoglyphs. They were the sites for great ceremonies, sacred places where the gods of creation were celebrated. Could this be the purpose of the Nazca Lines too? I realize I know almost nothing about Nazca rituals. Time to head back to Peru and follow this new line of inquiry. When I get to Lima, the first place I visit is the Archaeology Museum. Elsa Tomasto is a curator of the greatest Nazca collection in the world.
These are the spiders.
Yes.
It's just like the geoglyph.
What I'm looking for is evidence of Nazca rituals. It's not long before Elsa shows me some. It really takes me by surprise.
Yes, these are ceremonial urns.
What are these figures?
You can see trophy heads.
Trophy heads.
Yes, you can see here and here. You can see the hand with the head, and the neck is cut.
Yeah, that's the trophy head.
Yeah.
The mystery of the Nazca deepens. Who were they? I've been asking questions about them as astronomers, engineers, and farmers. Suddenly, I discover they were headhunters too. I knew that the Inca, who dominated this area 500 years after the Nazca, decapitated their enemies and took their heads as trophies, even using them as drinking vessels. Now I discover the Nazca did something similar. In another room of the museum, Elsa shows me the gruesome evidence.
So this is a trophy mummy.
Yes.
What was the use of them?
Probably ceremonial. They call it trophy heads, but we are not sure that it was a war around it.
Wow. Can I hold it?
Yes, but
Yeah?
very, very carefully, please.
Okay, very careful. Wow. It's just, you know, I've seen mummies, but I've never just seen the head.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. Without a body, all you have is a head. It feels as weird as it looks. It's really weird. This one has an unusual skull. Isn't that strange?
Yes.
It's sort of squished.
Yes.
Why?
It's a deformation. They use it when they were babies. They use the deformator.
They would?
Yeah.
Okay, so they would deform themselves voluntarily.
Yes. You can
Okay,
see
yeah.
here another thing. They took the skin out
Yeah.
and clean the muscles and take out all the soft tissue to be sure that it will dry. And then take again the skin and put it again.
Yeah.
And then they used to hang it.
They would hang it by its own hair.
Yeah, sometimes it's hair, sometimes it's cotton. It's not always the same thing.
And so this ritual was served what purpose?
You don't know.
Perhaps to get something from the gods.
From gods, these were offerings. Elsa tells me that most of the trophy heads are Nazca people. So perhaps they're evidence not of conquest and warfare, but ceremonial violence, some sort of human sacrifice. Is this what happened on the lines? As I walk past the thousands of skulls of long-dead Nazca, I wonder about the scenes they've witnessed. I need to get back to Nazca and ask some more questions. I've heard news of an excavation which is unearthing more signs of ceremonial life. Kawachi is a site on the edge of the Pampa, just a mile or two from where the lines are drawn. Ruben Garcia is the archaeologist who's regional supervisor for the Nazca area.
Well, Kawachi is the ceremonial center, the main ceremonial center of the Nazca nation. That it was a pilgrimage center where people from all the Nazca nation came, gave offerings and special feasts, sacrifices.
So Kawachi was like the Mecca or Jerusalem of the Nazca culture?
It was.
Located by a water source on the edge of the desert, Kawachi was huge. It was the greatest Nazca pilgrimage center. 40 pyramids still lie unexcavated beneath the sand. It's also the place to which many of the lines out in the desert lead. Evidence from Kawachi and from comparisons with the ways living Andean peoples perform their rituals have convinced most archaeologists about the ritual significance of the lines and figures. Many are related to fertility. Ruben has organized a demonstration for me of one of the most common Nazca symbols.
The spirals, they are related to the conch shell, which is used traditionally to call the mountain gods and the clouds for rain.
Finally, the pieces of the puzzle are falling into place. Most archaeologists now believe the lines were sacred pathways on which the Nazca performed their great ceremonies. The figures represented creator spirits, the gods controlling the forces of nature. The Nazca turned their desert into a vast altar to the gods of creation.
And everybody thinks now that most of the lines were made to be walked upon in special ceremonies, rituals, and dancing, and maybe singing, playing musical instruments as a way of calling the gods.
The Nazca made their geoglyphs so big because they wanted the gods to look down on them and see they were remembered. When the Nazca danced on the lines and figures, they were making an offering to those mythic beings on which every aspect of their lives depended. Did those offerings include human sacrifice? Ruben tells me there's no evidence of violent rituals on the lines. But he knows there's still a lot about the Nazca to be discovered.